The Steelers just ended another season with the second half collapse and the people are fuming. We started off 10-3 only to end up losing 5 games in a row, but everyone's already heard the negative and how awful everything is, so I'm not going to be that guy. To give some benefit of the doubt, the Steelers during the 5 games losing streak, 4 of our losses were to Super Bowl contenders, and 1 was to a burning hot Bengals team playing for everything. We also had to play 3 games in 11 days off of multiple divisional games. And before you say the Ravens had to do the same thing, playing the Eagles, Ravens, and Chiefs is leagues apart from playing the Giants, Steelers, and Texans. Obviously, no matter how optimistic I try to be, this collapse calls for change and some people have to get fired. I don't think Fields was the solution to all of our problems, and I see Tomlin getting so much hate for not staying with him despite him being 4-2 and his only good game being against the Colts, in which he allowed us to fall down multiple touchdowns before he started playing well. I also see people misquoting Tomlin whenever he said, "That's why I get paid the big bucks," after he benched Fields. He didn't just randomly say that. That was after Wilson had a fantastic game against the Jets, and people were asking him how he made such a tough decision. All that being said, I would be okay with signing Fields to an extension to give him a chance, as I think his time under Wilson could have taught him a lot. There's not much QB talent in this draft, and we don't pick very high anyways, so I think giving Fields a chance is what we most likely will do. I also think there's a non-zero chance we bring Wilson back, but with how angry the fans are, I don't know if Tomlin is willing to sign Wilson. Wilson was playing great, but he made multiple truly boneheaded plays that cost us games, like fumbling against the Ravens instead of sliding and then throwing a bad pick, and then against the Bengals trying to get 3 yards instead of throwing the ball away to save clock when there was only 30 seconds left. Also, random thing, George Pickens clearly doesn't know what optimistic means. Please stop misquoting him. He was literally talking about how the team is moving in the right direction. Why would he just switch up and be like, "No, I'm not optimistic"? To quickly go over some other QB prospects, Sam Darnold definitely has to be in consideration, even though I know a lot of people will be scared because he collapsed his last 2 games. He's also played against poor competition the majority of the year besides the NFC North, obviously. Even though all that is true, leading a team to 14-3 is still 14-3. People are in love with Justin Fields, but he wasn't even averaging 20 points when we started him, and we were playing significantly worse teams than Russ did. The Cowboys and Colts are both worse losses than any of Russ's losses, besides maybe the Browns, but that was a snowy Thursday night divisional game. Unfortunately, this is a team that's afraid of making change, and as much as I've given Tomlin the benefit of the doubt, a lot of that stems from him. I was the biggest Tomlin supporter, but you can't keep Matt Canada for 3 years, despite the fact he runs a high school offense and never got 400 yards. And you have to risk it sometimes on 4th down. This is a modern league and you can't play super conservatively anymore. So as you can tell, our QB situation is really bad, but to just wrap it up, I think Russ did play better than Justin this last season, but I feel like Fields did earn his opportunity next year. He spent this time under Russ and he came out in a lot of just random packages and still put his all out for the team. And I hope he can make it. I hope he can have a rejuvenation in his career like Baker did, but I don't want to get my hopes too high. I've already touched on it a little, but let's talk about coaching staff changes because something has to change. I highly doubt Tomlin's going to get fired. Whether you think that's good or not is up to you, but I think there's almost a 0% chance he's not our coach until at least 2027 when his contract expires. But the players love him, and he's definitely an NFL caliber head coach, as if we fire him, someone like the Bears trying to establish a new culture would hire him immediately. So I don't think it's the end of the world that he's staying. Also, I get he's had midseason collapses, but I think that the Tomlin hate has gone too far. Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett never even deserved to be 9-8. Those are some truly awful teams, and when you have an awful quarterback and an awful O-line, it's always a disaster. But Tomlin dragged and aspired those teams to a winning season. His decision making off the field is what gets me mad, like as I've touched on before, keeping Canada for 3 years despite him being awful. Player-focused head coaches like Tomlin have been proven to be able to win. Look at Dan Campbell and Sirianni. However, Tomlin isn't just a player-focused head coach, he also runs this defense And it's no secret this defense collapsed at the end of last year, but in the 5-game losing streak, we had the lowest time of possession in the entire league, meaning obviously our defense was going to eventually let up. The defense still isn't entirely innocent though, because they were still getting cooked. So I think we do have to fire Terrell Austin. I know Tomlin calls the plays, but a better defensive mind aside him he could trust with play calling if his philosophies still don't work next year would be very helpful. I don't know if I have to explain why we fire Austin, but for the spark notes, this defense always had someone completely lost and looked poorly drilled in practice, so a new DC could hopefully conduct practice better and make everyone on the same note. I want to make it clear, I know Tomlin's defense collapsed, not Terrell Austin, but Tomlin has proven to be able to coach great defenses, so a new DC who could provide a new outlook and maybe call some of the plays while Tomlin takes charge of the major plays like third downs or whenever he has a play idea would benefit this team a lot. If you can get Robert Saleh, that would be great, as I think while he's not a good head coach, he would be a fantastic DC, and he was a fantastic DC with the Niners, but he's probably going to want complete play calling, so I don't know if we're going to be able to get him. For a more niche pick who I actually really like, Aubrey Pleasant, the Rams passing game coordinator and assistant head coach, is a great candidate. He used to be the defensive backs coach, so he could help improve our corner room, which has been a need for a decade, and he's been great at getting the most out of mediocre corners as seen this year, where the Rams are starting Ankello Witherspoon, who older Steeler fans may remember as not being very good, and yet the Rams are still better against the pass than the Steelers. These Rams DBs may be the worst in the league, so even though the Rams are below average against the pass, they should be much worse. They also just had a fantastic game against the Vikings. Pleasant is also very young at 38 and could be a future head coaching prospect. On the offensive side, I think Arthur Smith has been fine. People get mad at him for constantly running tosses, but Najee needs tosses so he can find gaps in the O-line, as even though I love Najee, he might be my favorite player on the team, he's just not good enough. The tosses are meant to make truck-sized holes so Najee can run downhill, but our offensive line just isn't good. I'm not sure why Jalen Warren didn't get more touches, but I think we saw Najee's last snaps with this team, and I hope we get a running back that was as good of a character as he was. Speaking of the O-line, we also need a new O-line coach. We've constantly spent draft capital into the O-line, yet our rookies never seem to improve. I think there's definitely a problem with coaching, and while I don't have a name for you, offensive line coach definitely has to be on the menu. Now that we've got the ugly coaching changes done, we can start with free agency and specifically the re-signings. As I said, I think we re-signed Justin Fields to a 2-year, $50 million prove-it deal with low guarantees like $30 million and an out after 1 year, as we haven't seen much from him. Originally, I thought this deal would look a lot closer to $15 million a year, but after talking to people who know more than me about contracts, as shocking as it may seem, 2-year $50 million with $30 million guaranteed is cheap and will most likely be offered by someone to Justin Fields. The only other Steeler we re-signed would be Jalen Warren and Corliss Waitman, our punter, as I don't think we re-signed Dan Moore considering we spent a first on Broderick Jones, and he was good in his rookie year. Jalen Warren's contract could look like a 2-year $10 million deal with $2 million incentives and $7 million guaranteed, and Waitman's contract could look like 3 years for $9 million with $5 million guaranteed. All these re-signings leave us with $19 million in effective cap space, which is just your cap space minus what you have to pay your draft picks. This $19 million includes cutting Holcomb, who I really like, but in 2 years he's only played 8 games, and Peyton Wilson is looking very good beside Patrick Queen. So I think it's time we go our separate ways. To start, Cam Sutton has been awful at slot corner, and Corey Trice has been constantly injured. So I think we signed Mike Hilton to a 1-year $4 million deal with up to $2 million in incentives. We're also losing all of our QBs, so I'd like to sign a veteran in the locker room, and I think Mariota on a 1-year $6 million deal just to serve as a backup would be nice. For QB3, we can just pick someone towards the end of the draft. I think both T. Higgins and Chris Godwin will be re-signed to their teams, but if for some reason they don't, I think Steelers would have to pounce on them. Besides them, I don't think there are any real stars in free agency, but receiver has been a need, and I think Amari Cooper could be a great one-year patch. I don't know how the NFL will value him considering his off year, but a 1 year for like 12 mil with some incentives up to 16 mil seems about right, and you'd use the rest of the cap for backups like O-line, who you're very thin on right now, and you can always restructure or cut some more players if you need more money for backups. Now to start with the most interesting part, the draft. In round 1, Shavon Revel is a star corner who's amazing in man and should be going in the top 5, but an injury really knocked him down. He's long, a great athlete, and great in man like Joey Porter, so he can finally start playing man hopefully and stop getting burnt in zone. For round 2, if people are low on Isaiah Bond, I made a video on why I'm high, and if he's here, you definitely take him. He's a speedy, great slot that can also be a Z option and a crisp route runner who always seems to be open. If you don't think Bond's going to be available, which I can see why because he's a great prospect, his teammate Matthew Golden just declared for the draft and is someone who can also line up in the slot and Z. He doesn't have the elite speed of Bond, but that's not to say he's slow, and he may be an even better route runner. I know we signed Amari Cooper, but we have to look at the future because he's just a short-term patch since he's already 30. In round 3, Jalen Warren will probably need some help, and while you can sign a backup in free agency if there's no one good enough, I really like Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee in round 3. He's someone else I think is severely underrated, and he could serve as a great change of pace back with great speed, great vision, and no major injuries throughout his career. If he's not there in round 3, which I don't think he should be personally, DJ Giddens is another great back who I like, who I could see in round 3. Finally, for the round 4 pick, if QB Dylan Gabriel, who I made a video on why I love and shouldn't be available at round 4, is there, you should take a flyer on him. Or if Jackson Dart is there, who is someone I really want to like as a high pick, but his QB friendly offense makes me hesitant. It raises questions about his ability to conduct an NFL playbook, but if he can learn the offense, I feel like his peak is someone like a Bo Nix, and his floor is a solid backup QB, so I'd be happy with a round 4 gamble on him. I hope you enjoyed the video. I know it was a little ranty, I had a lot to say, and I know we're all mad, but all we can do is look to the future and like and subscribe.